Alright guys, so here's my final video on ranking the Sinister 6, which if you do not know, it is ranking 6 franchises. Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, Chucky, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And this is my final video where I did five parts in total. This will be the fifth of 50 movies, 6 franchises. And here we go with my top 10. Now, this one is incredibly hard. Like I said in my last video, if you haven't watched the other ones, check them out. But with my last video, for ranking 20 to 11, like, it was incredibly hard because I love the top 20. Like, it's so hard to choose them. So this is going to be hard to choose, even though I know what I'm going to say. It's very hard to choose these rankings. But let's just get right onto it. My number 10 would be Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. This one is so funny how much of a difference reputation it has gotten since 1982, because people hated it when it came out because it was not about Michael Myers. And I understand the dislike because it's part of a franchise that wasn't part of a franchise, like with the character, like the character wasn't in it. But it is still a Halloween movie. It still has the holiday. And they were going to do an set of anthology films, but because they did 2 Halloween movies with Michael Myers, people were like, "Where's Michael Myers? Where's he at? Why don't you give me what I want?" So people were pissed for years and years and years. So 30 years later, at least, we finally have given it more of a open mindset. Like, people actually start to like this movie and enjoy it. And I love Halloween 3. I love the fact that this is a really, really incredibly fun B-movie type of movie because it's got Tom Atkins, who is awesome in the movie, like he is in most movies I have seen him in, as this, of course, womanizer. Again, awesome, fun, silly. And he goes with a girl named Ellie to go to this factory where this guy, Colonel Cochran, is making Halloween masks that, with the mystery solved, you realize that it is going to set off a chain reaction on Halloween night. Whenever they watch on TV these kids with the mask, they will be killed. They'll have snakes and mice come out of their, and bugs come out of their, like, head. Like, it'll literally kill every child on the planet. I don't know about every child, but you know what I mean. Logic is not something that I really think is important in these movies, because also it's trying to be a B movie anyways. But all the kids are going to die, and Tom Atkins is the man for the job. He's got to go save them, he and Ellie, until Ellie becomes a robot. This one, like the first 2 movies, even though it's not about Michael Myers, it has incredible cinematography like the first 3. Dean Cundy came back to do this one, I believe. And the 80s-ness of it in a good way, in terms of how it's shot, in terms of how scary and dark it feels. It actually is pretty scary. I think that it works on that angle because how they film these first 3 movies work incredibly well. And this one, even though it is not part of the other 2 movies, it still feels like it is kind of a part of it, with the cinematography, with how it looks, how it's filmed, how it's shot. It looks like a Carpenter movie. Like, it's funny enough, it looks like that. Really like the characters, really like the gore, even though there's not a lot of gore. But again, I like how it's a build-up thing as opposed to just a lot of gore. That scene with Buddy getting the bugs and snakes come out of his face is one of the coolest kills in any horror movie. And then I love the fact that it shows that, and then it shows all the kids around the world, or around the U.S., I guess, going and getting all the masks, getting ready for that night when all this is going to be doomed to happen. So, and you don't even know if it actually happens. I'm assuming it happens, but I don't know. But I do love this movie. I love this. I love the gore. I love the cinematography. I love the characters. I love how this is just such a creepy, bizarre movie that would have done way better if it wasn't called Halloween 3. If it was just called Season of the Witch, people would have maybe liked it more. But it also might have been forgotten by time because there are millions of 80s horror movies that came out and just went away. Like, nobody even remembers some of these unless you seek them out. And this might have been that case if it didn't have Halloween 3 in the name. So, what I'm saying is, love Halloween 3. Halloween 3 is great. So that's my number 10. And then my number 9 would be Scream 2. My favorite Scream movie. I love the fact that this does everything the first movie does, but does it I don't know about better, but it does it just as great because with these characters, again, Sydney is a fantastic final girl. I love how this story arc continues with her, where the first movie, her boyfriend was the killer because her mom slept with all the guys in town, and then Billy's mother left him because Sydney's mom slept with his dad. So Billy's mom has been gone, and then the killer in this movie is Billy's mom. So Sydney has this connection between the family where like her mother is causes all of this stuff to happen, and the mother, Laurie Metcalf, is fantastic as the killer. She's great, and Timothy Olyphant as Mickey is a great killer as well. And the gore is really good. I really like all these new characters. Really like Sarah Michelle Gellar as Cece. She's not in the movie much. Really like Jada Pinkett at the beginning, where Maureen, where like that opening is a great opening for any slasher. I think that's an awesome way to open it at a movie theater, even though the other movies have done that, like He Knows You're Alone. But you know what I mean. Like, it's a cool opening, and I really like how this one plays with your expectations on who's the killer, because you don't know who the killer is until the end. Like, you were thinking maybe Mickey, but you wouldn't have thought it was the Debbie Salt character, even though you understand now, like, she's just there for no reason. That might mean she's the killer, but you don't know who she fully is until you realize she's Billy's mom. And I love that arc with Cotton Weary from the first movie being blamed for her mother's murder and then realizing that he's innocent because Billy killed her, Billy and Stu killed her, apparently, until you get to part 3, which again retcons it again. But I really love how Cotton Weary gets his light of day. He gets to become famous because he gets to become a better person after being framed and like sent to prison for being wronged. I think that's great. I think that's great that he and Sydney, God, I don't know why I keep saying that. He and Sydney keep going and they kill the villains together because they both were wronged. And that's great. I really love that story arc. And I really just love everything about this. I love that scene where Sydney's talking to the director of the play and how he's telling her, like, this story about, I forgot which person, but there was a person in history that they were talking about where, like, they were saying that they killed off everybody for, was it Cleopatra? No, I'm trying to remember. They killed off, they're talking about a story where, like, they get killed, like, this character, everybody around her gets killed and she has to fight back, and he's alluding to her, like, Sydney's got to fight back because her friends will all die, like, without it, like, she's a fighter. And I love that scene where he just says to her, like, say I'm a fighter. She's like, I'm a fighter, and he's like, I don't believe it. And she just says, I'm a fighter. And he says that's better. And this one on a college campus is great as well, with Gale and Dewey. Whenever Gale is running around through the campus is really, really thrilling and actually really good, like really effective. This one just has everything about the first movie. To me, makes it like, quote unquote, like The Empire Strikes Back of like the Scream movies, where like it does a great first one and then it keeps going at the second one and just ups the ante in a way where it's just so like such a great second story. So I love that. I just love everything about Scream 2. Scream 2 is fantastic. And then my number 8 would be Child's Play 2. Awesome. My favorite Child's Play movie. If I had to rank them, it was so hard because Curse of Chucky, Child's Play 2, and Bride of Chucky were all my favorites. Like, I couldn't choose between the 3, but I guess when push comes to shove, Child's Play 2 is the first one I watched. I love the ending. I love these characters. I love how this one is a little more fun than the last one, even though the last one is a great horror movie. This one is just so likable and so fun, and I love how this is kind of not a road trip movie like Bride of Chucky, but this one, there's a lot of like action-y bits where like Kyle, who's a great final character in this movie as well, like she has to run around town to save Andy from Chucky, who's driving them around town and then like going into the toy factory at the end, which is a very incredible like final place to end the movie on. Such a cool location. And again, the characters are all awesome. Like, Kyle is a great final girl. I really like Andy. Again, like, evolving from the first one. I like all these side characters that get killed. I I really like the gore. There's not a lot, but I like the gore when there is some. It works very well. And this one is just action packed, and really you care so much for these characters that I really do love this one the most. Like I feel the most for this for Andy. Like in the second movie, like he lost his mother. He's got a new kind of mother, kind of replacement, Kyle. But I love how they have a connection, even though they don't know each other very well. And they have to fight to kill Chucky at the end. And Chucky's great. He's got some great one-liners. Like whenever he screams, "I'm gonna get you, fuckers!" Like whenever he's trapped in the toy factory. Like that's great. Love everything about Child's Play 2. And then my number 7 would be Halloween 4. Where do I even start with this one? I love the fact that this one is, cinematography-wise, is not the same as the first 3, but this one looks incredible. It's got an incredible opening that's just silence, just like the sound of fall. Very creepy. The gore is good in this movie. It's more gorier than the first movie, because part 2 had gore in it, but this one is more gorier. And Rachel is one of my favorite final girls ever. Like, she is fantastic. Like, this character who at first is a selfish, kind of whiny character who has her foster daughter, Jamie, her foster sister, Jamie, who her mother, Laurie Strode, has died in between movies. So they both form a bond together. And the gore is really good, and these characters are all likable, all fun. They've got the cliches in it, but it totally works and is very serviceable with these characters. Love the ending, love the final fight with Rachel ramming Michael and like them shooting Michael like 60 times, and then the final ending where Jamie, the evil is brought to her, so Jamie stabs her foster mother. Which, of course, like Halloween H2O to Resurrection, it retcons the ending in Halloween 5. But if you watch this in the theater for the first time, and I didn't see it in the theater, I was born 6 years, 7 years after this movie, unfortunately. But I really think that this movie would have been incredibly shocking to see in theaters. I feel like people would have lost their shit, and I bet people did. I love the ending, I love the characters, love the gore. The guy getting his throat ripped out, great. Just a great tension building, one of the best Halloween movies. And then my number 6 would be Friday the 13th Part 3. This one is really awesome because, yeah, it's like the other first 6 movies where the characters are good. I like them. But my real pull from this movie was Chris and how she has like a history with Jason and how he might have raped her and like he attacked her in the woods. Like, that's really scary, even though logically it doesn't make sense where it would be in the timeline. But the timeline doesn't make any sense in these movies. But Chris is a great final girl. I really want to say, even though everything else is great, I love the ending. The ending is one of my favorite endings of the Friday the 13th movies. This is the first one I watched. That ending actually terrified me the first time I watched it, with Jason chasing her around. Like, Richard Brooker has such a scary demeanor. Like, it actually works incredibly well. Like, it feels like she can't escape him, and she doesn't, really, until she axes him in the face. But she literally, like him chasing her through the cabin, him chasing her like she's hiding in the closet, him running in, trying to break it open. She has to get out the window. She runs outside, gets in the van. The gas goes out because of the bikers. It's stuck on the bridge. Jason like smashes through the glass to try to get her, and then she runs away, and Jason's still chasing her while she's limping. It just never lets up. The ending is one of the best Friday endings. It is one of the most terrifying, and it actually genuinely does creep me out in this movie. Like, I love the ending. The ending's great. And again, it was like another Friday the 13th movie that was going to be the final one, where they even made a cake at the end of this movie saying, Happy Death Day, Jason, or whatever. Like, they actually said that. But then they made part 4 because this made so much money. And that was another final chapter. But I really love everything about it, but my real pull is the ending. The ending is incredible. One of the scariest endings ever. I love Friday the 13th Part 3. And then my number 5, very controversial opinion. My favorite Friday the 13th movie is Part 5, A New Beginning. I'm not saying this is the best movie. I'm saying that this is the most entertaining as hell one of the most entertaining horror movies I've ever watched, one of the coolest horror movies I've ever watched. It is directed by a porn director, Danny Steinman, who also directed Savage Streets, which I just watched recently, which I loved. He has a style, a sleaziness to it that I usually wouldn't go for, but the way that he directed this movie, the way that he made this so incredibly just overly exploitive, it was so incredibly fun. These characters are all fun. I really love Tommy as the main character who barely talks. Tom Shepard is a great Tommy in this movie. Even though all three of the Tommy actors are great, he's awesome, and he barely says a word. And I love the fact that this is a whodunit movie where you don't realize who the killer is, and whenever you realize at the end who it is, you still wouldn't have just guessed that whenever you realize Roy's the killer, because there are so many red herrings to every other person in the movie that they all could be the killer. I think that's great. These characters, again, are so incredibly fun and likable. Violet, who is this fun just character who doesn't have any real dialogue, like she's got a couple lines, but she's just like, she does robot dances and listens to like David Bowie and stuff, like she and Pseudo Echo, and His Eyes is one of my favorite musical like pieces of music in a horror movie. Like Tiffany Helms recommended to put that in the movie. Really love Violet. Really love Ethel and Junior, who are the most the most funniest characters in the whole franchise. One of the most charismatic characters, where Ethel is this stupid redneck character where she says to Junior, like this kid who's like her son, but he's like a full-grown adult. She says stuff to him like, "You dumb dildo, eat your fucking slop," like shit like that, where it's so fun and it's so stupid and exploitive, but it works. In entertainment value alone, this is one of the most entertaining movies I've ever seen. I love Friday the 13th Part 5. Love the gore, even though some of it's cut. Unfortunately, the MPAA did a bad job of cutting it. Of course they did in the 80s, but I also love the ending. I love how Tommy faces Jason, in which he faces Roy, but it's like he's facing Jason, in which Pam and Reggie, it's like him watching his sister Trish and him, young Tommy, like it's gonna happen again. So he has to stand up and kill Jason, which is Roy. But I love that story arc for Tommy. Like, he actually has to kill off the fear, even though of course he comes back in part 6 and is like, I'm gonna go and try to impale a dead Jason's corpse, and then he'll come back by a lightning bolt. but still, I love that story arc in this one. How he fights the evil, and even though we got that cliffhanger ending where he might have killed Pam, it's in the novelization it's that he doesn't. Like, she calms him down because he has her truck in part 6, but they don't explain that, unfortunately. I love that ending as well, even though it's a cliffhanger ending that, again, like a lot of these horror movies, just like stays on an open thread that we never get resolved in the movies. And Pam's a great final girl. Really like Pam a lot. Reggie's a good, fun character. Like, he's a great, fun final character. The gore is excessive and ridiculous, but it's so fun. The sex and the drugs and all the explosiveness that this director is known for. He does all that crazy shit in this movie, which is so incredibly fun and just exploitive. But it's so entertaining. It's one of the most entertaining horror movies I've ever seen. So that's why it is my favorite Friday movie, and that is why it is my number 5. And then my number 4 would be Halloween 2, 1981. This one, in terms, I was talking about cinematography with Dean Cundy in part 3. Cinematography is this is one of the creepiest looking movies that I've really ever seen. I love the fact that this is the darkness of this movie, the way that they shot it, the way that they use a hospital in the dark is really, really incredibly effective. And again, this is one of the first horror movies I ever watched, like Friday the 13th Part 3. But the way this movie is shot, the creepiness to it, the sense of dread is fantastic. Laurie Strode, even though my negatives with this movie are little, like Laurie Strode and Dr. Loomis should have been in this more, because it's more of a 80s slasher than the original, because this came out after Friday the 13th and it's in a couple of its sequels. So This one is not the first movie again, which is a good or a bad thing depending on what you think about it, but I love that it is not the first movie again. It is a direct continuation, but it is an 80s slasher, and it does suck that Laurie and Loomis are not in the movie as much, but all these characters who are killed are so likable and so funny or likable or engaging. Like Bud is so funny. Mrs. Alves, who is this mean, like, or not mean, this kind of pushy, like, boss who's telling everybody, like she just tells them, like, what to do immediately before they even do anything. Like, I like that. I like Jimmy a lot. All the other characters are fine. They're fun. It's just a very incredibly fun movie with these characters that get slashed. But whenever we get to the ending, which is one of my absolute favorite endings to any Halloween movie, where Laurie is being chased by Michael through the hospital, and again, it is terrifying because Michael he's barely moving, and I love the fact how slow he moves, because he is literally like a ghost. Like, he is literally sitting there like he is fucking with her, because she already has a leg injury. Like, she's already, like, injured where she can't get away, but he is fucking with her like a snake to a mouse. Like, he is literally, or a cat to a mouse. Like, he is literally treating her like prey, and it is really scary. That scene of her running down the stairs, and then that scene of him slowly walking down the stairs with that blank mask, is terrifying. It is one of the most terrifying scenes in any horror movie I've ever seen. And even though a lot of people disown this, like John Carpenter does, I understand, because they do the brother-sister reveal, which continues on with the other sequels until the new one, which ignores that. I understand why he doesn't appreciate this one, but I feel like this one has so many great things. The sense of dread, the cinematography, the gore. I like Laurie Strode a lot, even though she's not in it much. And it makes sense, though, because she was injured in the last one, so she's in a hospital this time and sleeping most of the movie. I understand that. It's just that it is a negative, but I do love her. I do love her final confrontation with Michael, which is like the first one again, but in a hospital, and it is terrifying. And I love that they tried to make this movie definitive, where at the end, Loomis and Michael are blown up, and then Michael walks out of the flames to try to still get Laurie Strode, but then he just falls down and dies and burns. And even though, of course, we get all these sequels, whether you're talking about the continuity of Halloween 4 or Halloween H2O, Michael somehow just isn't really burnt that much anymore. But I love how they tried to make this definitive, because Halloween 3 was going to be a set of anthology movies afterward, but it bombed, so they were like, we got to bring Michael back because people like Michael. And the score is incredible. The score from the last movie is truly one of the best scores ever, the first Halloween, but this one is like a faster version of it, like you're on a ticking time bomb, where like shit's escalating, shit's going down, and it works perfectly. Love Halloween 2, one of my absolute favorite horror sequels ever, one of my absolute favorite horror movies ever made. Love Halloween 2. And then my number 3, another Halloween movie, Halloween 2018, the one that rebooted kind of and ignored every sequel. It just connects to the first movie. Laurie Strode, 40 years later, is traumatized, kind of like H2O. And it is a little pretty unrealistic that this character, 40 years later, after just the first movie, is so traumatized. But she gives a fantastic performance in this one as well. I really love all these characters. I love that it's a generation of Strodes. I love how its trauma goes down a family line. Laurie messed with her daughter Karen enough to where she trained her while she was a little kid to make sure, like, to have her trained for the evils of the world, is what Laurie says. So now Karen resents her mother, and then her mother is kind of being, like, Karen is kind of being that way towards Allison, who's Laurie's granddaughter, who Allison has no idea what's going on, but, like, she knows what's going on with Laurie, but, like, she doesn't understand why they don't just get along, and why Laurie doesn't forget about Michael, because it only happened one night 40 years ago. But I love all three of these generations of Strode women. I love how all three of these characters are so interesting. Like, they all have different things. Like, Laurie is traumatized, Karen is resentful, Allison is kind of resentful in a way of being disappointed by everybody and not knowing the full truth. I really love that. The gore in this is awesome. The cinematography in this is awesome as well, because this feels like a Carpenter film. It feels like Dean Cundey. Even though it's a modern movie, it came out in 2018, but still, it feels more it feels like there's more dignity, I guess, in terms of like how it's shot since like Halloween 4, honestly. If you don't count the Rob Zombie remakes. And the score is fantastic. There's a new score that John Carpenter put in this movie that is incredible. This one doesn't continue on from part 2, so there's no Laurie and Michael being related, so Laurie just thinks that he's going to come back for her. And that's fine. I don't understand why they ignored the brother-sister thing. It honestly doesn't make a difference in the movie, logically. But just love everything about this. The gore is incredible. The characters are incredible. There's some great emotional moments with them. The score is incredible. Everything about this movie is truly awesome, and it was so fucking hard to choose between Halloween 2 and Halloween 2018. It was so hard. But here we are. That's my number 3. And then my number 2 would be the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This, like, if you haven't, I think people know what my number 1 is, but if you don't, my number 1, it was so hard to choose between this, my number 1, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre original. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is my number 2, is the scariest movie ever made. Like, it is truly one of the scariest. It looks like you're watching a literal snuff film being shot. Like, they're filming a snuff film. Like, it is terrifying. It is truly one of the scariest movies ever. There is no gore in the movie that you really see, besides a girl getting on a hook or a guy getting hit with a hammer, like with a sledgehammer. But you don't really see the impact of either one. It's just kind of the reactions. And their reactions is more scarier than gore. Like, gore can be over the top. Sometimes it works great, but in this, I love that this has absolutely no gore in it. I love that these characters are just real-life people who are just there and just realize that they are they are going to die and be murdered by this horrific family of cannibals. And rewatching it again recently when I ranked the franchise, this one, like, I actually went to bed after watching the first one and I was sitting there like, oh, I'm kind of creeped out because it actually makes that much of an impression. This is one of the scariest movies ever made. Love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre original. And then my number 1, kind of a cop-out, but I love the first Halloween. 1978, John Carpenter's Halloween. One of the best horror movies ever. I don't know what the fuck to say about this movie because I've talked about it so many times. I love everything about it. That's all I could say. There's nothing I dislike. The opening is it was one of the scariest openings ever. Michael Myers is one of the creepiest characters in any horror movie in this one, especially the first 2 movies. And Laurie Strode is a great final girl character in this one, even though this is only her first movie. She's good in it. Really like her a lot. Really like the characters, really like the fun, really like how it's bloodless gore, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that makes it scarier than seeing a lot of gore splatter on screen. So again, I can't say much about the original Halloween that nobody else has said. Everybody has talked to death about this movie. Love the original Halloween. That is it. That is my final ranking for my ranking the Sinister Six. So that's it. Tell me down below your thoughts on me ranking these films, and thank you guys so much for watching.